You've been all over it, man. I got to give you some credit. I think you nailed this Wick Grossbeck thing, and maybe just tell our audience what you uncovered and what's going on right now with the Boston Celtics sale.
Well, just from talking to people, it came clear to me that his dad's the one driving the sale, and I questioned. I knew he didn't have like a majority stake personally. I mean, he's always identified as owner, and I understand the face of the team and running the team for his dad. But I just thought, let's just try to nail down what that number is. And when I pitched it to both his dad and him that Wick has less than a 2% stake, nobody argued with that, and they seem to be pretty comfortable with that news coming out. And now Wick's kind of not using that number, but he's explaining that he's not the majority shareholder, and that his percentage, as we know, is as we now know, it's smaller, and that's how I remember it when they bought it 22 years ago, whatever. But anyway, so, and it just, I didn't get a lot of information from anybody, and Pags announced that 2 days after telling us he was going to be in on the bidding, told me he had a non-disclosure agreement. So something happened in that 48-hour period with him. And Irv, the dad, who's going to be 90 in a week and a half, indicated that he was going to talk to me, and then thought the better of it and had no comment, but was very polite about it. So, and again, he did not push back on the information that I was going with. So it feels like, subsequently, I think that across their team that they're all pretty comfortable with this getting out there now. I think it's kind of cards on the table, and folks now understand what the dynamics are a little closer to what it is, and kind of correcting people's perceptions over the last several years.
Well, you've covered many sales. I mean, the Red Sox sale, I don't even think they were the highest bidder, right, at the time?
Correct. So that was what we call the Bud Selig bag job, where the commissioner put together parties that didn't even know each other. I mean, Henry and Lucchino had never met, and that was put together, by Bud, and who denied it, but later said to me, "Someday you'll thank me for it." So that, in my view, that's how that went. But yeah, and some of those options weren't great. I mean, Dolan was one of them; wouldn't have been great. Frank McCourt was one of them; probably wouldn't have been great. The late Joe O'Donnell was one of them. I think that would have been great. But John Henry came in and won 4 World Series. That turned out pretty great.
Have you heard anything about Wick being upset about maybe his father being the one making the decision to sell his stake? Do you think he's upset about it?
Well, I think, Joe, yeah, I do, because, we know what his posture was in the weeks and leading up to the championship, and in the days right after. Whenever asked, the team's not for sale. We get paid in championship parades and this kind of thing. And then quickly there was a different narrative, which is, oh yeah, we're selling the team. So that kind of didn't add up. I mean, I realized he wouldn't necessarily play his hand, but the level of cockiness and sort of independence that he was coming at us with on that, and no attempt to kind of explain the layers of real ownership that are behind this. And then it seems to me his dad just decided he wants to get his affairs in order. There's 3 other children besides Wick, and the man's going to turn 90. He's still teaching business at Stanford. I had people saying, "How could you email an old man like that?" Well, Jesus, the guy's teaching business at Stanford. I think he can handle email, and he clearly can, and is a very sharp guy and ongoing. But within Boston, I mean, we don't get a lot from John Henry anymore, or certainly Jeremy Jacobs for 49 years has been under the radar, but this guy has been the most under the radar guy ever. I mean, he's Howard Hughes as far as we're concerned. I can't find that he's ever been quoted, which is why I was so interested when, for a few hours there, I thought he was going to tell me stuff, which he opted not to, and that's regrettable in my world. But it was nice to have some communication with him, and like I said, he was extremely polite.
All right, talking to Dan Shaughnessy of the Boston Globe. You mentioned the old bag job years ago. Do you think this will go to the highest bidder? And, with all the betting sites out there, I know how you feel about those these days, Dan, but if you were to pick a favorite, who do you think would be the favorite?
Well, it's a good question, Joe, and I think that The whole Pags thing is interesting because, they've been together 22 years, and we know Pags have at least an 8% stake in the team, which is more than Wick, but not more than the Grosbeck family. So you've got that. And he announced the day of the sale announcement that he was going to be in on the bidding. And that was a little bit of a throwdown, I think. And folks say, well, why didn't they just work this out among themselves? Because the Grosbecks are venture capitalists, and you want to find out what the high number is. You don't sell your house to a guy who likes your house and without finding out what it's worth through the open bidding process. And to me, that's what we're seeing here. And then it's on Pags to match or do better than whatever that high number is. So, I mean, you see everything now with this. I mean, Bezos is liquidating some of his stock, and is that to buy the Celtics? You're going to see this ongoing. I think it's not going to be FSG. I think that John Henry does not want to be paying rent to the Boston Bruins. I don't think he wants any part of the luxury taxes that are coming with this team. He can't sleep at night over baseball luxury tax. So I don't think that he wants to take on what the Celtics have committed to down the road or pay rent to the Bruins. There's the LeBron problem. I think he can get around that, but I just don't think that he's a player in this. And I think that there's NBA protection against the Saudis, or I don't think the league allows international entities to come in. But you'd have to check that beyond me. One of the crazy things is Wick in that statement telling us he plans to be governor through 2028, but that they want to have the shares sold by the end of this year or early next year. Well, don't you think whoever takes over the team and buys all that stuff and becomes the majority owner, they're going to want to be the governor or name the governor? That sounded like fantasy to me. I didn't understand that.
Yep. You mentioned John Henry. Have you emailed with him of late? I know he's doing a lot of emails these days and isn't really talking about the Red Sox. He's been pretty quiet on that. Even if you ask about the Red Sox, there's no comments. Have you tried to reach out to them, and what's it been like trying to contact John Henry?
Well, that's been an awkward thing a long time. There's no secret to that. We haven't talked in 15 years. Wow. I understand that, and I really value, working at the Boston Globe, and the fact that he feels the way about me that he does, which is well documented, and the fact that I'm still allowed to write the column and put my opinions in there. I give him high marks for that, because that cannot be a lot of fun to pick up and see me throwing the elbows in there. So, but I'm not gonna have a high yield on reaching out to John. That ship sailed.
Well, let me ask you this: are you really throwing elbows, or is it just facts?
Well, that's how I like to think of it. But everybody has their interpretation. So no, I think that I try to represent the fans and the loyal Red Sox legions who have been so loving and good to this team in every way through the decades. And I think if they're not getting what they deserve, that I try to represent that. But there's different points of view in that, and John considers it a false narrative. And again, he's a smart guy and an accomplished guy, way more than I am. So I understand that. You
mentioned the word narrative. I hear that a lot. It's like the new sports radio thing, right? Oh, the narrative, whatever. But one thing I heard you the other night, you might have been on NBC Sports Boston, and I think you said that, well, the ownership doesn't think they're going to win a championship anyways, so why invest in the team? And I'm not putting words in your mouth when I say this, but isn't that the lazy narrative for an owner? And yet he wanted to blame the fans for their expectations. Like, I don't know. Here they are. They're actually in the playoffs as we speak right now.
Yeah.
So don't you think they should invest in their asset, what he called it?
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be fascinating how this unfolds. I feel like, they've got a game plan, and the team has exceeded expectations in a million ways and kind of upended the game plan, which was definitely to this to be a bridge year and to be, sellers at the deadline. They've got pieces, I mean, Jensen, Pivetta, O'Neill, those are guys that have value for a contender. So it'll be interesting. And that, if you watch that ESPN telecast last night, those were not good interviews that you saw, and the take that they're undecided, and they're Craig Breslow talking about, they still don't know. I don't know, man. As you just said, they're in the playoffs now, and I just think that's going to, not that anybody needs to answer to anybody, but I think it's a poor message for the loyal fans and certainly for the clubhouse and for Cora, who, by all appearances, is just out of here. And I understand that too.
Well, Dan, I had a chance to catch up with you. You were at the Boston Bullpen Project. Very nice event. That's a dream team, right? That was a dream team core that you guys had there that night. And I walked up to you, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. I mean, you're spitting fire when it comes to your Globe articles, so I got to give you that. You're still sharp as a tack. But I asked you, because you wrote in your article, hey, I'm alive, everybody. And I had my son get my laptop and a meatball sub. And when I saw you, I said, hey, man, this is an important question. Where'd you get that meatball sub? Can you tell everybody where you got that thing?
Pizza Etc., Oak Square, Brighton. You know, it's got great meatball subs and great everything. So, yeah, we definitely loyal to anything Brighton.
You got to check that out. It's beyond NBC Sports Boston. They're replaying that Boston Bullpen Project. It was absolutely outstanding. I do have to ask you one more Patriots question. I think they're going to be the worst team in the NFL this year. I've bet on it. Plus 345 right now. I think it's ownership in the way that in the way that Robert Kraft and Gerard Mayo, the way that he handled this offseason when he made the joke about the orange juice and then spilled the orange juice. I think that's exactly the way the season's going to go. But, you know, there's another owner that's not spending money on their asset as well.
Yeah, it's always been weird with that because I don't pretend to understand the NFL salary cap and, you know, is there a cap and all that stuff like that. But you hate to see, you know, this parade of bringing in coaches that get paid by other teams and kind of nickel and diamond things with all the success and they've had. The one thing there that you do have is you have an owner that you know he cares about his team. We don't all agree with how they're approaching it all the time, but I will say, you know, I think that the Patriots are front and center. It's not international forestry or certainly it's not the Revs or whatever. And that's something with the baseball operation. You haven't had that same assurance given, you know, Liverpool, Roush Racing, Penguins, PGA Golf, et cetera, et cetera. So we give the Kraft family their props in that area. But, yeah, sometimes curious about why winning every contract is so important.
One of your colleagues, Matt Stout, mentioned that there may be a new stadium in Everett. Are you buying it? Obviously, it's being reported, but do you think it's something that will happen?
Are you talking about for the Celtics or for the Revs?
For the Revolution.
Oh, yeah. I'm always dubious about new stadiums. I mean, I've lived here a long, long time. And, you know, there's so much greasing of palms and so many things have to happen for the payoffs. And it's just so hard to get anything done around here. But that one's certainly closer than the fantasy of the Celtics new owners and all this kind of jazz. So, I mean, and it's smaller and it's manageable. But the municipalities and all the commissions and everybody who's got their hand out, I just think it's tough to get anything built here.
All right, he's Dan Shaughnessy, everyone, who was with the Sports Hub when it all started. They're going to be celebrating the 15-year anniversary, Dan. So you were a big part of that, mentor to me as well. And I think your watch might be in the mail. I'm not sure, but there will be a 15-year celebration, I believe. So I do want to give you props, man. You were here since day one. Remember the Dan Shaughnessy show on the weekends?
The Dan Shaughnessy show. Poor Adam Jones had to do all the work, and it was my show. But it was those were good times.
Yeah,
good times.
And then I took his job. So, you know, it all worked out full circle here for me. For Dan. Dan, I do appreciate taking a few minutes, my man. Of course, you can check out all his work over at the Boston Globe. And hope to see you around, Dan. Maybe we'll get a meatball sub sometime at Oak Square.
Let's do that. Appreciate you and your work, Joe. Take care, man.
Appreciate it. He is Dan Shaughnessy, Hall of Famer, by the way. Hall of Famer. Dan Shaughnessy of the Boston Globe joining us here on 98.5 The Sports Hub.